I was a little resentful about my childhood for a while because I felt like I lost the gene pool lottery, right? Like, why couldn't I be born to just middle class people? Someone that has a car all the time. And there's some times in my childhood we my mom didn't have a car. We had no car. Like, we had to walk to the grocery store and we had to take the cart back to the apartment, filled with groceries and keep the cart. But you look back at why am I having success? And, I coach and mentor so many insurance agents, and why are they having a harder time than I am? Or, man, my whole life I was just going through adversity. And I had no choice. There's things in my life, I just had to deal with, super uncomfortable, had no choice. I'm a kid, but just had to deal with it. So for me, that stuff happens and it's just okay, well, this sucks, but let's keep going. It's, was a gift now, right? So I didn't win the gene pool lottery. I just didn't know it until later.
David Price, thanks for coming on our podcast. I understand that you're in insurance or have some experience there. What can you tell our audience of entrepreneurs, business owners, and people investing in business about the insurance industry?
Yeah, absolutely. First off, I appreciate the opportunity to be on your podcast. And, insurance it's funny because, obviously insurance, I feel like people are that's boring. I would never want to do that, and think about paperwork and all these detailed things that you almost like being an accountant, like a sales accountant or something like that. But for me, I was looking for a different business, like a business opportunity. I was in my mid 30s, and I realized there's nothing I'm doing right now. I was comfortable, and I'm sure, right, a lot of times people are comfortable, but I just came to this realization moment, and I was just man, there's nothing I'm doing right now that's actually going to let me live the life I wanted to live when I was a kid. And I feel like when we're kids, that's when we have these big dreams and these big goals and everything, and then also
still be a kid then.
Yeah, I know. I think everyone should still act like a kid, and then all of a sudden they're they just settle for something, and they get beat up from life a little bit, and they're all right, well, I guess I'll just do this instead, and it'll be completely different. So I realized there was nothing I was doing that was going to give me those goals. So it was time to either settle and just be all right, this is it, I'm in my mid 30s, and let's just go with it, or let's make a drastic change and find a platform that would give me it's still not a guarantee, but find the platform that would give me a chance to have those things. So I just started calling all my friends that were business owners and just talking to everyone I knew that was having more success than me, or their family was, right. A lot of some friends that just came from wealthy families that own nice big Italian restaurants and stuff like that. And I was just looking for what it was to do, and I was looking at franchises, looking for a coach that would coach me on something, whatever it was. I was talking to anyone about everything. Every possibility was open. I just wanted to be able to do what I want from where I want with whoever I want. That was the three prerequisites. And somebody pointed me towards insurance. He wasn't even doing insurance. He's just hey, you should talk to so and so. They're having a lot of success with insurance. Obviously, everyone knows about insurance. It's been around forever, right? And honestly, I didn't think I was qualified. I thought you need a 4-year degree to have anything to do with insurance, and found out I was just really a 20-hour course in most states. In Florida at the time, it was a 40-hour course, which I had to take. And but just like anything else, right? There's different business opportunities. A lot of times people want to start a business so they could be a business owner. But I feel if you're a true entrepreneur, you understand solving a problem is what you want to do, right? You don't want to just hey, you know what? I love tanning. I love going tanning all the time. So I'll start a tanning salon and, live in a place that no one really tans anymore or something, right? It's a business, yes, but it probably wasn't going to give me the freedom I want. So insurance, I knew it was great, but the thing was what's the demand? How are you finding your clients? That was so important to me on everything I was looking at, because I learned early on that's the hack to be successful, is find a demand that's not being met, and figure out how to meet that demand, and hopefully you can't even meet it. So they had a really strong lead program of people looking for insurance already, and I just had to learn how to sell it, then teach other people how to sell it. So for me, it was just the simplest, easiest thing, and it was just super duplicatable. I could do it from anywhere. So I just look at it real simple. It's if you're selling something, the product's insurance versus whatever else it is. But the beautiful thing with insurance, cars, we sell cars, you're limited by inventory. You can only hire salespeople in that geographic area. You can only sell to that geographic area. Or insurance, as long as you're somewhere in the US and I'm licensed in that state, I can sell you an insurance policy and I could be wherever you guys are, right? I could be anywhere I
Mhm.
want and do it. And there's no inventory. When COVID happened, there wasn't like, issues because we didn't have enough insurance, right? There's an insurance shortage. There wasn't an insurance shortage. So to me, it was just like a business hack, if anything.
Mhm. There's actually a couple of things I want to touch on there, but I think I'll circle back because I'd like to pivot for a moment and talk a little bit about resilience in perseverance, grit, if you will, in entrepreneurship, life in general, perhaps. I understand in your past, you grew up with government assistance, and you mentioned some of the resilience that your childhood maybe instilled in you. I think one of my perhaps unusual, perhaps usual, I'm not sure, heroes, I think, of our era is Mike Tyson. He's this really interesting character. He might, different images might come to your mind depending on how you've interacted with that name. But I see him as something like a modern sage, someone who's been through the ringer, knows humanity a lot more in a macro view than most. And I've seen like Werner Herzog, this German auteur director, just flabbergasted with his knowledge of history. He's like, "How do you know this shit?" And he's like, "I just studied. Like my coach made me just watch these tapes every day for like 4 hours, and he had this like photographic memory almost of strategy and all this." And anyway, he talks about his childhood, and as you might not be surprised to learn, it was pretty harrowing and challenging. And he says he doesn't want his children to grow up like that. Um, and I feel kind of like conflicted. Like at first, it seems obvious. Like yes, we should all strive to have our children grow up with maximum safety and comfort. But then I'm like, that's actually dooming them. Perhaps like maybe it's like this like choose your adventure kind of thing. You either have it rough and everything gets good from there, or you have it like nice and everything goes downhill from there. Now I'm simplifying, of course, but I'm curious, like where do you fall on the resilience and how crucial of an ingredient do you think is your upbringing and the business person and how you approach business today?
Yeah, those are great questions, great point. And yeah, Mike Tyson, it's crazy because I grew up when Mike Tyson was just knocking people out like crazy, and went to jail, biting people's ears off, just completely wild person. And then you hear some of the stuff he says now, and you're just like, wow. I hear him saying something about the lines of like, he doesn't do certain things with like competition because he doesn't like want to wake the beast up anymore, like, and just hear the kind of the wisdom that he has now. But I guess when you go through all that he went through, I mean, I feel like he's lived like multiple lifetimes as like different people, right? Going from like super poor to like you can't go anywhere without somebody knowing who you are, and you're rich and you can have whatever you want. To I'm sure his financial situation changed drastically throughout the years as well. But yeah, so for me, I did grow up with a pretty rough childhood. I like to say I definitely had everything I needed, right? There's people that had a lot less than me growing up, but I was a little resentful about my childhood for a while because I felt like I like lost the gene pool lottery, right? Like why couldn't I be born to just middle class people, right? Like someone that has a car all the time. And there's some times in my childhood we my mom didn't have a car. We had no car. Like we had to walk to the grocery store and we had to take the cart back to the apartment, filled with groceries and keep the cart. So there's a lot of things that happen. And when you're going through life and you're not having success, because I wasn't at first, right? And then you get to this spot where all of a sudden you're, more successful than you thought you'd ever be, right? And obviously there's different levels of success, but I'm definitely more successful than I thought I would be in my life, even, as that childhood kid. You start measuring success differently as well. But you look back at like, why am I having success? And, I coach and mentor so many insurance agents, and why are they having a harder time than I am, or why do they stop, right, and when they hit start resistance or slow down. And I'm like, man, my whole life I was just going through adversity, and like I had no choice. Like there's things in my life like I just had to deal with, like super uncomfortable, had no choice. I'm a kid, like, but just had to deal with it. And then and it's just normal. It just can become the norm. So now, like as an entrepreneur, like you're gonna deal with the most stressful situations. You're going to want to stop. You're going to want to quit. You're going to take, mental health break, whatever you want to call it. But it's normal. Like you can't grow as an entrepreneur and expect it to be simple and easy. So for me, like that stuff happens, and it's just like, okay, well, this sucks, but let's keep going. And I think it's was a gift now, right? So I did win the gene pool lottery. I just didn't know it until later. But it's interesting you talk about, Mike Tyson not wanting his children to go through that. And I think there's like a saying where it's like the first generation like makes the money, then the second generation they do a good job too, right? Because they learn from pop, but then like the third
Right.
generation like they lose all the money, and because they don't know anything, they have no skills, they don't know what it's like to struggle, they have nothing, right? Where the second generation got to see the come up, right? So as a kid they
Mhm.
weren't rich, and then they became rich. And I think that makes sense a lot. So that is interesting. Start got me want to start studying some families and taking a look at that, right?
Well, it does make you wonder because you sort of look at these stories of people that come from nothing and they become the top of their field in whatever field. And to David's point, you can kind of go, I get that there's a grit there that might have come from whatever their background was as children. But there's also millions, billions of people across the world that have the same situation and don't find their way to the top of the tree. And it just makes you wonder, what is the difference between those that manage to make that huge leap and those that don't? Do you think it's a personality thing, a perseverance thing? Do you think it's a goals thing? What do you think it is?
Yeah, that's a good point, right? Because yeah, you don't automatically have success because you had a tough childhood. Matter of fact, you
Mm.
probably statistically you probably
Most
don't,
likely,
right?
yeah.
The majority you don't. Uh, and then you look at siblings, right? You look at
Mm.
the sibling just did completely different than the other person. And as you say that, I'm like, rewinding and doing like a little highlight reel. And I think sports definitely helped me out. I
Mhm.
think about when I was younger, I had a hard time being around people. I was in a ton of new schools, so I was like always a new kid in school, which was super super uncomfortable. I think that also helps, right? Being the new kid in school and having to introduce yourself all over again and new friends and everything like that. But I started wrestling in seventh grade, and I think that was like the first time I was naturally just really good at wrestling. I think my first year I only lost two matches, and it was the first two. Like it's like after that I figured that out, I was like, all right, and then I figured it out and did really well. The following year I was all county, all shore, the eighth grader, and then just got better from there. But when you're good at a sport, obviously it like comes with something, right? You got people now they're excited to be around you. They want to talk to you. You kind of feel like you're in a leadership role, so it builds your confidence. So I think something like that definitely helped me. And then also too, what else happens with that is teachers start taking a special interest. So,
Mm.
for instance, I wasn't great at school. So, I almost failed off the wrestling team a couple times, but, teachers would, do extra things for me and try to help me and give me a chance to, retake a test or whatever it was. And then my wrestling coach, he was absolutely amazing too because a lot of times he was picking me up for wrestling and for matches stuff like that because I didn't have that all the time. So I guess when you have that and it sparks something in you and then it continues to grow, so that definitely helped. But I definitely always had like a competitive edge in me, so that definitely because that's what business is to me. The business is just like a real world video game. Like I love playing video games. I would stay up late trying to unlock the next level. And like that's exactly what I feel like with my business. It's like I just like how do you unlock the next level? Like
Mhm.
that's it. Like how do I make this better? How do I optimize this? How do I, increase this? And to me it's like I'm just trying to level up. Like I'm a level 13. Let's see how powerful I am when I become a level 14. And that's the way I feel most of the time. So it's yeah, it's just a real world video game.
There's a theme there that I picked up from a couple of things that you said. So, the saying, it's not what you know, it's who you know, which in a lot of cases might come from my family know these people, right? And then you get it through nepotism. But I think for those that don't already have those doors open to them, it's their social skills that are, in my opinion, way more important than any grades or technical knowledge. Having to start school, make new friends, build those social skills, get other people that are invested in you through sports or through whatever it is, that then we're not just a solo being trying to fight our way and scrap our way through the world. We have the support of other people that we can build either through existing doors if they're there for those that have them, or through the social skills that we learn along the way. And that comes into sales as well, which I know you're big on. What do you think in terms of your sales skills? Do you think some of that was rooted in the social skills you picked up at school?
Yeah, I was always selling something.
Mhm.
I think it was like survival, right? So when you don't have a lot of money, and mom's not going to give you some money when you ask for it, and obviously we all need money to survive, even as a teenager. Probably a lot more now then. So I was selling lollipops, I was selling bike parts. Like I was always selling something, and I wasn't afraid. Like I wasn't afraid of the word no. I wasn't afraid of talking to strangers and doing what I had to do to some basic stuff to be a salesperson. I am an introvert. I do enjoy being by myself most of the time, but I also know when I need to step into my being an extrovert, because at the end of the day, if you are in sales, especially, I lead hundreds of insurance agents, and being an introvert's not going to help my business at all. So I definitely have to jump into my extrovert. And a lot of times people, they don't, when they see me on YouTube or they see me on stages and stuff like that, they don't think I'm an introvert. But then when we do hang out in like smaller meetings or different things, or sometimes I'll travel, do some stuff, like have agents come to Puerto Rico or different trips, and they see it, they're like, oh wow, you really are an introvert. But yeah, I think I think about the teachers that did have a special interest in me. One's Miss Krats. I actually tried like finding her on Facebook a few years ago, to just like thank her, like because really I was like felt like I was like this like lost student until I had like it was like sixth grade. I just had a teacher. She just for whatever reason she took a special interest in me and like made me actually like try harder in school and feel a little bit more like I belong, and that to me was like the beginning turning point for me. I feel like my life could have went completely different, like 100% like completely different. So I think like if you're a teacher watching this, you definitely do make a difference, because there's some teachers I definitely think about that my life might be way different if it wasn't for them.
I fully agree. It's really inspiring to see what a difference one person can make. There's the end of Schindler's List, which is based on a true story, when Ben Kingsley gives Liam Neeson the ring and says, in Hebrew it's translated as "He who saves one life saves the world," or something to that effect. He or she, I guess you could say. And one of my favorite sci-fi series, The Expanse. At the end, I don't think I'm giving anything away. It also is clear that one decision that was like on a nice edge turns out to be pretty consequential in a positive way, or potentially positive anyway. And it just, a reminder for each of us as we show up at the grocery store, to people on the road, at our work, like you said, teachers, everywhere you go, one word, one act can have this like chain reaction. It was kind of a morbid example that came to mind when Becky asked you that question, like your life could have gone any number of ways. What do you think it was, like genetics or whatever? And I think there's like this perfect, perfect is probably not the best word to use in this case, but good enough, like exposure to a difference maker. So for Mike, I think it was Customato, who really turned his life around in his teenage years. And might have been a teacher, or just like a little sprinkle of unconditional love here, or inspiration here, tough love here, whatever, just whatever it was. And it like synthesizes. So the morbid, analogy that came to mind was pure ice. So the pitot tubes that froze over in that Air France going from Brazil to France in like 2009 or something, they said it encountered pure ice. So there's like this potential ice at like 30,000 feet or something, but it actually needs something to like coalesce around, to like form around. I wish I had a better analogy that came to mind, but it was like that in the opposite direction. So let's try to just imagine that it's a positive example. But it's like, this chemistry that we have together. Like we're not one thing, we're many things in fluid kind of forming our reality. I'd like to go back now to insurance and sales. What you mentioned about like solving a problem, I think with entrepreneurship it was kind of like this aha moment. It sounds very obvious perhaps now, but I think I was attracted. What attracted me to entrepreneurs before was the stature and status. They were like Olympians, the successful ones. They had wealth and access and prestige and this and that. And so that was kind of the shiny kind of part that I noticed. And then like with people like Elon Musk having hundreds of billions or something, I heard someone say, if you want to be wealthy or successful as an entrepreneur, solve important problems. And I was like, oh, of course, like, I should do it for a reason. And I think there's probably examples either side, people solving important problems, not getting the prestige, people having prestige that maybe didn't solve important problems. But I think that is a good North Star to orient with. When it comes to insurance, maybe this gets a little controversial, but I think that insurance itself is and you could probably apply this to many industries, controversial. Some people think that it can be like a cash grab, like you're selling, maybe not you personally, but an insurance person is incentivized to sell things that someone doesn't need in order to meet a quota. And you think of like Glenn Ross, if you saw that movie with Alec Baldwin, ABC. So how do you balance the competitive spirit that we all have, doing a job well, training people well, being ethical, like being an ethical champion, I guess is how I'd maybe try to say it. How do you balance like try to find out, how to solve a problem, but also like how to be the best at what you do? Where do you land on that as far as like insurance? Like, is there ethical insurance? I imagine there is, but how, like, what's your answer to people that maybe are skeptical of insurance salespeople?
Yeah, absolutely. I always tell people that if you increase your ability to help people, your income will increase with it, right? So the better you get at helping, and the more people you're able to help, the more income you have, right? So like Elon Musk, right? He's like trying to save us by like getting us to Mars. So he's trying to save like a whole civilization of people. So he's getting paid pretty well for that, right? The helps up there. But yeah, as far as insurance, I guess, movies could definitely do a great job of making people look bad or good, right? That's
Right.
exactly what they do. But there's different types of insurance. First off, you mentioned car insurance would fall into property and casualty, right? So I'm no, I don't think anyone's a fan of car insurance because like you have to pay it whether you want it or not. Feel like when you do get in an accident, they actually just raise your rate, so they get their money back anyway. Like I feel like it's just a lose-lose situation. It's not the type of insurance I sell. So we focus on life insurance. So the beautiful with life insurance is you don't have to have it, right? And the people that we talk to, they reach out to us because they need it or they want it, or they want some information about it. So the insurance I sell the most of is final expense, which is basically just a small whole life policy designed to cover the immediate needs when you pass. And that's typically going to be for someone middle to lower income. So, for example, if Bob passed away and a funeral costs $10,000, Bob doesn't have $10,000 and no one close to him has $10,000. Our products are a really good fit for Bob. So for $60, $85 a month, Bob knows that when he dies, the person closest to him isn't going to have to figure out how to come up with 10 grand and lose dad or whoever that is. And that just costs Bob an extra, 85 bucks a month, 60 bucks a month, whatever. It depends on health and age, right? Our average premium is about $85 a month. So that's what it is. So I teach my agents it's important. So what's cool about insurance as well is you get paid years after you sell the policy. So you sell the policy, your commission is based off of that first 12 months. Then after that first 12 months, there's something called a renewal. And some policies, it might be for 10 years, some of them might be for life, depending on the product and the carrier. They got different ways they pay. But typically, you're paid every single month after that, a much smaller percentage. So you want to sell something that they're going to, one, be able to afford for life. That's the goal. And so I teach my agents, like, everything you should do in this business is think long term. I've made millions of dollars with all long-term decisions. There's a lot of times people, they want the cash grab, they want the fast money and stuff like that. I know we didn't really go over it much, but I'm a recovering drug addict. I spent 20 years battling addiction, and making short-term decisions definitely never helped me long-term. So after battling with addiction, getting clean in 2013 or 2012, I decided that, start making decisions based off the, what the long term and not short term. So same thing, right? And I use a lot of the principles I learned in my business. And I tell my agents, I was like, listen, we were at a call today. I was like, listen, if the person can't afford $40 a month, you probably don't need a summer policy. Because in my experience, every policy I personally sold that was in like that $30 range, like they canceled. They couldn't afford it. Like it wasn't something that they can pay for. And it's not like your time's more important than sitting there and wrestling with somebody to get them to buy a $40 policy. You want to sell insurance to somebody that's going to be to keep this policy for its intended use and make sure it's there when that person passes away. So I think it's just about like teaching your values, teaching the ethics, having these conversations with agents, and then also paying attention to them. One thing that I do differently than probably most sales organizations is, principles before production. So if I see somebody and they're selling a ton of insurance, but I don't think they're doing it the right way, like we're going to have a talk. Like, they may not be a good fit for my organization. Because ultimately, again, I want people that be with me long term. I don't want people short term thinking.
I'm so with you on that, David. So my background, I do sales training and sales coaching. And I've worked with people that want to do the quick route. And that usually means that they become more manipulative, more pushy, the typical things. If you were to Google, in fact, I'm not sure if this is true in the States, but if you Google in the UK, the top 10 most hated professions, I think 4 or 5 of them are sales. So one of them is car sales, and then estate agents, I think, is in there, or realtors, I think you guys call them. Like, people hate salespeople because of that short term, I'm going to do what I can to get my commission check this month. The longer term view, which might mean that you actually let some sales go, that you don't push people over the line. Longer term, I always think about it as 3 R's. You get repeat business, which from what you're saying, you also get paid for that in your work. You also get referrals. They're much more likely to send people to you if they feel like they've been treated well. And they're probably going to leave you a good review. Those things all help you in the longer term to not be fighting against an algorithm change on social media or I don't know, an economic change, because you've set it up in the right way that your customers bring you more business because they're treated well. And usually that means you're not going to push them over the line right now if it's not for them. So in terms of the longer term versus the short term, have you ever had situations where you think could have pushed a bit more and should have pushed a bit more? Or do you think it's always better for business to play that longer game?
Yeah, there is a balance. So the thing with insurance is a lot of times the people calling us looking for insurance probably should have got it already.
Yeah.
And so they've been procrastinating a good part of their life. And then no one thinks they're dying tomorrow, right? Everyone thinks they're going to live forever. That they have time. And then the other thing is, it's not like, for car sales, right? I call, car sales are more like order takers, right? The car is doing the selling. The person gets to drive out with a new car. They either don't have a car, or they want to upgrade, or their car is giving trouble. Like they're excited about this car. Where insurance, the person actually doesn't get to use it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's definitely a different sale. And I learned that myself. I sold a lot of different things throughout my life. And I was humbled a little bit at first selling insurance, because I was like, oh, wow, this is different. So you gotta get past the first set of objections for sure, right? Because you'll just get the natural, like, oh, I got to think about it. I need to talk to my wife. Like, just these natural, and this is before you even really qualified them for anything. So you definitely want to like make sure you're still getting them into the application. You're still asking enough health questions and learning about their medications and stuff like that to make sure that, you get them pre-qualified for something. So a lot of new agents, including myself, when I first started, is, I think it was fear, right? I think it's fear is like, I sold in person at that time. We do everything on the phone virtually now. And you'll be in the house, like, oh, I got to talk to my wife. All right, see you later, bye. Like, kind of scared to move forward. And then you start learning. You just gotta, kind of ignore that first set of objections that you get. The thing is, like, you want them to have something to really say no to, or something they could say, I need to think about too. I mean, typically, I don't think there's anyone that really needs to think about making an $85 purchase. I don't think that people typically have to talk to their significant other or their accountant or their financial advisor and these other things I hear before they spend an extra $85 a month. I don't think they're doing that for their cable bill. So just really understanding that. But then there's that line where, okay, we went out, we filled out the whole application. We got all the health questions. We got them pretty zeroed in on the product for them. We got pretty zeroed in on the costs, and they just don't want to move forward. And that's it. They don't want to move forward. Get some referrals if you can, and move on to the next person. And that's why I say it's so important to always have lead flow and always ask for referrals, right? Because I see insurance agents, they don't get leads, and they get one person in front of one person. It's like, this is the only way they're ever going to get paid. It's like they just have to like hammer this person. And for me, that's definitely not the way to do business. So I tell my agents, you should minimum get 50 leads a week. So you always have someone new to call, to talk to. So there's no reason why you should be trying to get someone to purchase something that they just really don't want.
Mhm. The best calls I've had is when I don't need the sale, and you're just in a totally different headspace. And I think there's like this global intelligence, like people can just sniff out like, desperation or fear. And it's just like, nope, I don't know what it is, but it's not now. And so, yeah, I think lead flow is really important. You mentioned, I think, a couple times how you mentor other people and coach others, and you train not just agents but business owners. What are some of the traits? We touched on resilience and grit and whatnot, but are there any traits that you can identify that very clearly separate the ones who quickly make six figures to those that never really break through?
Yeah, I think attitude's important. Having a positive attitude. If you're that kind of person that somebody cuts you off on the way to work and like that ruined your whole day, and you got to tell everyone about it for the next 3 days, like, you probably shouldn't be an entrepreneur or be in sales. Like, you have to be flexible. Work ethic. There's a lot of people that want to be entrepreneurs or want to be self-employed, but then they forget the actual work part that goes with it.
Mhm.
So you got to have a good work ethic. And then the other thing is you have to be coachable. You have to assume, if somebody started a business, for instance, if someone decides they were going to get their insurance license to come work with me, or they had their insurance license and they're going to leave whatever company they were working with to come work with me, like, I'm 99.9% sure they weren't happy with something, right? There's something they're trying to get. And typically, if you're trying to get something, it's because you need some new information, right? There's something you're doing that is, or you need to act on some new information, right? There's something
Mhm.
that you're not doing. So you got to be coachable. And when I got my insurance license, I felt like there's a lot of things I knew about a lot of stuff. I literally pretended I knew nothing for a year. I just played dumb for a year, because my ability to play dumb gave me the ability to learn, like, max. Every time someone said something to me, I just like, okay, sure, yeah, is that it? Okay, yeah. Like, instead of like trying to outsmart it or try to put my own take on it, or question it, or like, oh, but I would actually do it this way, like, and that's what a lot of times people want to do, right? Or they want to give you their stats, like, well, you don't understand, I used to work at this other company and I was the top person, and
Mhm.
again, like, you're not there for some reason, and you're here, so there's something that you wanted that you didn't have. Let me see if I can help you with that. So those are three things I look for: is like positive attitude, good work ethic, being coachable. And I used to look at people and look for people that were like, just really good talkers, right? There's some
Mhm.
people that like, I mean, they literally say, oh, Dave, I could talk to a tree. I'm like, all right, great. But like, they didn't have the heart. And as soon as like things didn't work the way they wanted them to, or the way they expected it to, they just shut down. And there
Mhm.
was like nothing to do to get that person started again. So I dealt with that a lot. So and these were people I thought would do great. And then you had the people that weren't really social people that actually did really well, because did those other three things.
Mhm.
So I learned you can't measure a person's heart, and most people don't do what they say they're going to do. So you just gotta kind of give them a chance, and hope those other three things work out.
Well said. On that point about being a good speaker and introversion as well, reminded me that I mentioned I was in Asia for a bit. I was a tour guide over there and worked for this company with a few tour guides. And it was a surprise to me and a few others that some of the best tour guides based on customer feedback were the ones who were introverted, not the ones who maybe showed up the best on the first day, gregarious and full of energy. I mean, that's great. I'm not trying to say one's necessarily wholly better than the other, but there's just if you're measuring like what do I need in this role, there's all these little unknowns, and so I think you mentioned the time you've spent and some wisdom probably unearthed through kind of figuring out that magic formula. Um, in your like going from scaling from a solo producer to running an entire organization, were there any systems or processes that were like the Pareto principle, like get this right and it'll like totally make a big difference?
Yeah, so I think like everyone else, right? You have an idea of like what success looks like and what you need to do to be successful. And it's just like, all right, well, I need to learn how to sell, then I need to teach other people how to sell. Um, and there's a lot of things you can focus on. But what I started realizing is that leads drove everything. That you get if you get your organization to work X amount of leads, you'll get X amount of production. Like it was so black and white, like so and it scaled from the small agency all the way to the large agency. Um, so once you start realizing that, you're like, all right, well, the more leads the agent gets, the more money they make. Then the more leads that the agency works as a whole, the more production we do. Then it's like, all right, well, we're in the lead working business, which makes
Hmm.
sense, right? If you're in sales, why wouldn't you want to talk to somebody interested in your product or service that you sell and figure out how to get more of those, and there's literally a math equation I could put out there and I could do any amount of production based off of getting the right amount of leads worked. Well, obviously you need more people to work those leads. So that's what it came down to. It came down to, getting the people you have committed onto, and confident with leads, um, and then finding more people, right? And that was it. So once I realized those two things, then it was like, all right, well, at the end of the day, that's what I'm in. I'm looking for talent. I'm looking for people, and I'm making sure I can get leads in their hands. And then the rest, the training and all that stuff like that, that all actually comes second to those two things. And it was really interesting because as soon as I figured that out, I think it was maybe 2019, somebody took the time and sat me down and showed me at the insurance carrier level all their top agencies, how many people they hired and how many leads that got worked. And I was like, oh wow, like, and it was like the top five, like the math was exactly perfect. So as soon as I seen it, it's like, all right, I guess I guess I wasn't doing it right. Let me focus on this now, and it just completely changed my focus, and then everything else just became easy because like exactly what to get hyper focused in.
Hmm. Going back to comfort versus, let's say, adversity, I find it challenging, and I've heard from other business owners that it can be challenging to find that sweet spot between taking care of those that you value, and have like driving motivation. So what I mean is, um, okay, when you're leading a bunch of salespeople, is there like a perfect formula that's just going to work like regardless? Like you can put as many people in there and they'll like kind of self sort and select? Or are you customizing like a base pay rate and commission percentage depending on the person's kind of character or whatever you can figure out?
Yeah, so the pay is pretty standard. So it is 100% commission, and we do it based off production. So an agent comes in, obviously they don't know anything, so their commission's lower. And the way I look at it is the production is your report card, right? So like somebody, if you're like, hey, David, I'm a great salesperson, cool. I should be paid well because I'm a great salesperson. Great. I'm going to give you that opportunity to show me. So you're going to come in
Mhm.
here and, when your production gets here, you go there. And when it's here, then you'll get a raise. And when it's here, you'll get a raise. And there's no one that can stop you from getting a raise except for you. And you're in charge of giving yourself a raise. Then that will go with all the way, if you're like, all right, well, I'm going to build a business, I'm going to build an agency, I'm going to hire agents. All right, good. And as your production goes up, and these are the levels of commission that you can get. So make it 100% on them. They
Mm.
control it, very standardized. And to me, it's the best system because in the insurance industry, right, there's people that sometimes they'll bring somebody in and they'll be out of commission, and like there's no way they could get a raise. They're just stuck. And obviously, if that was me, I wouldn't have been able to do what I've done because there's no way to grow, right? You need the commission. That's how you get paid, and you get to pay other people as well. So that's been started doing that a while ago, and I think that works great.
So talking in terms of lead flow and the value of that, because that all ties into the commissions that people earn and the production that they make. Can you share any strategies that you use marketing wise or outreach or anything that has helped with lead flow?
Yeah, so we spend a lot of time on lead flow. I got a whole team dedicated to it. Anyone could create leads, right? And a lead could be defined as a phone number and a name. And in the insurance business, just like probably every other business, there's different types of leads, right? There's stuff where they can market it on Facebook or Google or other platforms and make it look free, right? Make it look like some kind of like government free program. Obviously, the cost of that lead is going to be super low, and the agent's gonna be on the phone with somebody that wanted something free. And for me, and there's people that do that, and I'm sure they do okay, but I want to protect the agent's mind and their mindset. And if they're just on the phone with people, arguing with people all day long that thought it was free and they're mad and they're hanging up and they're yelling at them and stuff, I just feel like again that's not going to help me for the long term that goals that I have.
Mm.
So we make sure that we are advertising, right? So the first parts are going to be like the graphic and the copy, and we're advertising insurance, right? There's no doubt that it's not about insurance. But then after that, we're bringing them to a landing page that gets real detailed, right? So now we're asking them what coverage amounts they want. We're asking them who the beneficiary is going to be. We're asking them what their hobby is. We're bringing them through like multiple pages. They have to click a couple different things. They got to manually enter stuff, right? So we want to make sure that they're going through this process because there's people that aren't going to go through that whole process. And that's the person we don't want on the phone with agents. So we want to make sure that this person went through all this before the agent got their information, right? Because the agents are paying for these leads. So we want to make sure we're providing good value with that. Now, when we get to the end of it, and this is something that took us a while to build and we built it custom, uh, the agent gets the lead of the client, but then the client or the lead gets the agent's information. So we shoot the agent's information out to the lead, and with there, it's got the agent's phone number with a click to call. It's got a add to contact. So if they click this button on their phone, it'll automatically come up like a virtual business card, and it'll save the contact right in their phone, which is going to help with this new iPhone update that's about to come out, where it's going to start screening calls if they're not contacts. And then there's a text button, right? Some people like they don't want to talk on the phone; they want to text. And there's agents that like sell insurance through text messages. And when they click the text, it'll pre-populate a message automatically on their phone. So open up their texting app, and it'll say, I'm looking for a quote on or something like a pre-populated message. I don't remember it verbatim. So they're getting this, and so now it looks super professional. There's different ways that they don't want to talk to this person; they want to text. There's different ways that they could get in contact with the agent. So the agent's going to try calling them, but sometimes about 20% of the time, they actually just call the agent directly. So it makes it a lot more ideal, right? When you're selling something and they're calling you saying, "Hey, I want this thing you sell." So again, we spent a ton of time doing this, ton of money, lost a bunch of money in the creation of this, and then learning and process and everything that went through this. But ultimately, we're really happy. I mean, I feel like we nailed it, but I also felt like we nailed it 6 months ago with the version we had then, and we actually got even better. So we're going to continue to keep improving this. And this is probably what I spend the most time on, because to me, this is the most important thing, because this is like developing your demand. I used to do hurricane work. So a hurricane would come in, flood a bunch of houses or mess up a whole bunch of stuff. And like the local community can't handle all the damage when a hurricane comes in. So it's a great time to help some people and make some money when that happens, because there's a huge demand that can't be met. So it's the same thing. Like I want to create like such a demand for my agents of like high quality leads of people looking for the product, people literally calling you looking for it. And that's going to give you the best chance to be successful as an agent. But then ultimately, I want to help you build a business and build an agency of your own.
Hmm. I like that. Oftentimes, in let's take an organization, marketing and sales are at odds with each other, right? Sales will blame marketing for the quality of the leads or the amount of leads, and marketing will blame sales for not doing the best job with the lead. But actually, thinking about it together as a what, how many leads, but what quality of leads are actually going to make the best use of the salespeople's time? Because if they have 100 leads a day, but actually only one of them really wants to talk to them, like you said about mindset, that's actually not going to help long term. If they only have one lead a month, that's also not going to help them long term. So it's finding that balance and thinking about it from every perspective there rather than we do this bit and we do this bit. It's a combined thought. Do you find, so you said about objections and kind of getting over those first objections. So in the world of sales training, sales coaching, I see a lot of that and different schools of thought in terms of how you deal with objections, kind of consultative selling and how you go about that. What are some of the principles or the eh, kind of outside of insurance, maybe universal principles you think that apply well in most sales jobs?
Yeah, I think no matter what you're selling, like that very first objection that you get, like I think it's safe to say that objection is not real, right? It's more of a reflex. I do it all the time too, right? You walk into a store, a salesperson comes right up to you and says, "Can I help you?" And say, "No, no, no, I'm just looking."
Hmm.
I remember I was buying a TV, and every 5 years or so, I want to get the newest, best TV that's out. And I'm researching, I'm reading all the reviews, and I'm doing all this research to find out exactly what TV. So now I'm down to the TV, the model. I know the price. I know everything I need to know. I just have to go to Best Buy now and get this TV. So I pull into Best Buy, walk in. Sure enough, the salesperson comes walking right up to me and says, "Can I help you?" And I'm like, "No, no, I'm just looking." And like as soon as I said it, I stopped for a second because you can't like walk into Best Buy and like walk out with the TV. You actually need the salesperson to get it and put it in that big cart for you and walk it to the register. So I like stopped for a second, embarrassed, and like, "Well, actually, no, I actually do need your help. I'm here to buy this TV." But even being in sales, talking about objections all the time, right? It like showed me that I still said it. So it was still just this natural reaction of being caught off guard.
Hmm.
And it doesn't matter what you sell. I mean, it's TV at Best Buy, that must be like the low, one of the lowest forms of sales, right? I don't feel like that's a salesperson. Again, that's more of an order taker. But he's still got an objection for me. Of course, he walked away, when I said it, but I had to like humble myself and stop them. So if, like that's the case, and you got to realize like that's happening with everything, no matter
Hmm.
what you're selling. And too many times the salesperson, when they get that first objection, they listen to it. They'll be like, "Oh no, no, they said they're busy. I can't talk to them right now." Like, are they busy? What are they busy doing? Or whatever it is. And a lot of times, I used to say, I haven't said it in a while, but I used to say, because I'm not training the agents too much on the selling part now. Now I'm training and mentoring on the building businesses and how to manage agents. But when I used to train a lot of agents, I said like the difference between an agent not making money and start making money is they stop believing the lies. And that was it. Like the first set of objections, that's it. It's just a bunch of lies. It's a fairy tale, right? It's a fugazi, right? So just understand that, and just just really just ignore it. Just because the thing is when somebody says something to you and it's not true, and you call them out and say that's not true, like that's not helping you in the process at all, right? That's not building rapport. Like, hey, you're lying, right? No, that's not going to help. Getting them to admit to you that they're lying, again, that's not going to help, right? So you kind of want to just just like if you have a child, right, and the child lied to you about something, the child's lying and is super embarrassed, it's like you don't call them out, you just like kind of roll with it, and the same thing, you just roll with it, and move forward. And for insurance, it was real simple for me to teach because you have this application that has to get filled out. Like ultimately, and so I say, if you never know what to do, it's simple. Just ask the next question on the application. Hey, I hate insurance agents. Absolutely, I know I hate them as well. I have your name here as David Price. Let me just make sure, did they spell your last name right? Is it Price? Yeah, that's correct, right? Just go into the application and just start with the information you already have on the lead, and then go into whatever the carrier needs to be able to find the right price for them. So then they at least can object to something that's real.
Hmm. Yes, I like it.
That's a great point there. That kind of knee jerk reaction of just like, no, I don't need help. That resonated with me because I've done the same thing and then had to say, well, wait a minute, yes, I do. It's almost like they're asking you, like, can I hold your wallet? It's like, no, thanks. I think I'll hold on to it. But yeah, it's well, you mentioned about the ignoring the lies. Um, I've noticed in the last few weeks, maybe last few months, um, that a lot of like life is, I guess, a lie. There's lies for good reasons, and lies for maybe unhelpful reasons. But many times we just kind of go with the flow in our individual lives and collectively, without necessarily questioning, let alone challenging why. And I was talking to Becky the other day. I had this call, the sales call, and I was bringing in this like energy and mindset from a previous interaction that had nothing to do with this interaction. And I like caught myself after the fact, unfortunately. But I was like, what was I doing? Like there was no, like I was bringing in like, a hamburger to a sushi restaurant. Like there's no reason for that. And it just like that first level of like awareness, like recognizing, that you don't need to do that. But going back to the lie part, I realize there's this disconnect in my life that I can see so far between the person that I want to be. You mentioned that child and the dreams and stuff like that, and the actor that I'm showing up as. And it's almost like I'm acting sometimes, not always, hopefully, but I'm acting out these feelings and like making these lies true instead of questioning like, well, if I'm going to be making lies true, which lies do I want to make true? Like at least have agency in that. And so it's just like, I don't know, I just share that kind of openly to just like question like, what how are you showing up? Like, what energy are you bringing into your interactions? Does it serve you? Is this like oriented with your goal? If so, like, how well are you doing? If not, like, why it's this and that. So anyway, I just what you shared there about that kind of ignoring the lies, I think is really important for both sides. Um, Speaking about business, many entrepreneurs rather, can wind up stuck like owning a job instead of owning a business. How do you, like, what's your framework for making that transition?
Yeah, I think a lot of them, right? I think a lot of them just, they're just their own employee that they manage. They don't have the freedom, right? I think for me, it was real clear that I want to start a business for freedom. But it was also clear that you don't get freedom in the beginning, right? In the beginning, it's war, right? It's gonna be super uncomfortable, and for me, I wanted to be uh like I always say, I had like tears in my eyes for my first year. And it was just like I wanted to be at like the most level of discomfort I could be. And it's not like I like to be not comfortable or in discomfort, but I know that means I'm doing as much as I could possibly doing for as long and consistently as I can. Because my goal was that maybe I could get 3-4 years worth of work done in like a year and get
Hmm.
further along the journey with that. But so the first part is learning how you're going to create revenue, right? That's the thing, is that you got to create revenue for your business. And a lot of times people forget that part too, right? They want to make signs and logos and graphics and websites and CRMs and everything else, but they forget like the part to create revenue. And once you master that, or can do a pretty good job of that, then it's like, all right, well, now you got to get someone else in charge of creating the revenue, and then figuring out what that is. And then ultimately you just look at your business. So I always evaluate my business, and I'm like, all right, this is what's going on. And I was like, all right, what's the one thing that's holding me back from growth? So that's super important. So like that's gonna be, the bottleneck, right? The one thing. A lot of times people want to look for all these different bottlenecks, but you want to look
Mm.
for the one thing you're gonna free up that's gonna give you exponential growth. But then there's a point where you're like, all right, cool. Like, how do I start eliminating myself from this thing? And then you start looking at that, and you write down tasks that you do, and some stuff you want to hold on to more, right? Because you're better at it. There's some things that I'm really really good at, and I don't think I can replace a person, or it'll be really hard to find one person that's going to be just as good at it as me. So sometimes you need to hire two people to cover that task for you. So it's just about looking at your business, and ultimately, my goal was to build something that would not just like operate without me, but continue to grow without me. And that's what I did. Now I still is very active in my business because I know the more active I am, the faster we're going to grow. And to me, my thing is like, let me see what I can do for the next 5 years, right? Let's see what we can accomplish, and then we'll evaluate then, right? On that, but ultimately, I've been able to create more revenue and more income every year in my business with less involvement from me, right? Less
Mm.
work from me. So that should be the goal, and it won't happen overnight. A lot of times people are scared to spend money, especially employees, or employees got to pay them every single week. But ultimately, like that's what you signed up for a business owner. Like that's
Mhm.
the goal, is you want to try to figure out how to get this thing operating without you, and give you the lifestyle and the freedom, right? Because at the end of the day, the real currency is time, right?
Right.
And you want to figure out like how to have as much as that to do the things that you really want to do. And Becky brought up a really good point with like the leads too, with the agents, like the time, right? It's like, I could give them all these like super super cheap leads, and the CPA could be really, really good, but like it took them a whole day to do it, right?
Mm.
Versus, maybe the CPA wasn't as great, but they made 3 sales in that same amount of time. So ultimately they're actually doing better. So when you start throwing time in that equation, things change. And don't forget about it, because if you look at like older people, I lost my grandfather not too long ago. And I was in a position where I could spend a lot of time with him during his last few days, and you see it at the end at the end of all of it. They wish they had more time, and that's the one thing I think everyone agrees on, right? Towards that end. So definitely make decisions that's gonna let you do the things that you want to do with that time.
Speaking of sales and perhaps life in general, in some sense, you mentioned this. There can sometimes be this fear of spending money. Like, I'd rather save it, have that optionality. But if you identify like what is the cost of not doing this thing, sometimes that helps. As I find oftentimes myself and others see one side of that equation very clearly, but sometimes it's like the iceberg sort of thing where there's a much bigger cost, and perhaps insurance speaks to this, where the right balance, it makes it's actually cheaper to spend money this way. Um, what's next for the Price Group and We Are Insurance Agents community? Are there any like innovations or expansions that you're excited about?
Yeah, we're about to launch another new lead portal, and really get AI a lot more involved with our leads. There's a lot of things you can do with AI, and it's such like a novel word right now, right? We could make the
I'm
graphic
just
with
thinking
AI.
of your AI agent trying to sell my AI agent insurance. It's like RoboJocks.
Exactly, right? But we want to we already do a lot of stuff with AI for our leads, but we want to continue to do more, especially on the data tracking. With that,
Mm.
figuring out how to get the lead on the phone, with the agent
Mhm.
better, really learning those things. So that's super important. And we're actually working on we have our own CRM now, but we're working on an AI powered CRM, or maybe not an AI powered CRM, would be the way, where the AI is definitely more in control than maybe the agent would be.
Mm.
So we're working on some stuff with that I think would be really beneficial. So ultimately, I want to make it. I mean, AI can do it now, right? It's not that it can't do it, but I think if you're an entrepreneur or a salesperson, or I guess anyone, right? If I had someone calculating and tell me what to do next every 5 minutes, or every time I finish a task, based off of what would be the greatest, then life would be super easy. I operate real well if like you tell me exactly what I have to do, and I just have
Mhm.
to complete that task, and it's like, all right, Dave, that's done, then do this, and that's
Mhm.
done, then do this. So ultimately, I want to be able to do the same thing with my salespeople, where they know exactly what they should be doing next. And then building a business, same thing. Hey, based off of your closing ratio and everything, it looks like you're really good at sales now, so let's start the process of hiring some agents, and click this link and do this and do this, and really walk them through that process.
Well, we covered a lot of ground, David. Real fascinating speaking with you. Thanks for sharing a bit about insurance and your journey. Very inspiring, very insightful. Is there anything that we didn't touch on that you want to highlight? And also, where can people get in touch with you and follow along with what you're doing?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's been great. I really appreciate the opportunity to be on the podcast. I think we hit on a lot. I think the message I kind of want to leave people is for them to realize, about 15 years ago, right? I was struggling with drugs, sleeping on couches, didn't own a car, moved to Louisiana with 2 bags of clothes and, barely finished high school, got 2 years of college that I'm like one class shy of an associate's degree. So definitely had struggles, right? Through my childhood, through as an adult. And, you know, I listened to someone Tony Robbins said probably like 2013ish, and it was like, if you want to be successful, just find someone that's having success and model them. And it just like hit me like, oh wow, okay, that's not what I've been doing. I've been trying to figure out my own. So I just want to give the message that it doesn't matter where you're at. If you're happy, you're cool, and like that's cool. I'm definitely I'm a fan. But if you aren't living the life that you wanted to, and you wanted to have more success and stuff like that, like the opportunity is definitely there. Just find the right mentor and have the right attitude and take the right action. And to find me, David Price Official on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn. And again, thanks for everything.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. Thank you.